What would I do if I won $980 million from the lottery? Well, I'm going to tell you some of the things, at least, that I would do if I had won that much money. First, you have to keep in mind how rich you're going to be. But the first thing, the very, very first thing I would do is I would hire an attorney, a financial manager that would protect me because you're going to have people coming through the woodwork, long lost relatives that you don't even know you ever had. So you're going to need somebody to defend you, to keep you away from people from snatching all that money. Well, somebody in Georgia is a very lucky winner of 980 million. And I did a little bit of research. So, out of the Georgia lottery, if you win 980 million, you're going to walk away with 452.2 million dollars. However, your take home after taxes is going to be 258 million, give or take. So out of 980 million, after all said and done, that's if you take the lump sum, you're going to end up with 258 million, maybe 259. I would say like 258, 257. So what would I do with that? First thing I would do is pay off the mortgage, pay off any outstanding debt, pay off the cars. Then I would put money away for my kids' college tuition because that's going to be the first thing that needs to happen. I mean, you're talking maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. Big deal. You won $258 million. You can afford $200,000 probably for each kid to go to college, right? Whether they're going to go through an Ivy League school, who knows? But yeah, $200,000, boom, out the door. Next thing I would do is I would probably buy another house somewhere warm, possibly Florida, like maybe Miami, a Miami mansion. Maybe we'll live next to Diddy. I don't know. Maybe I would be Diddy's neighbor. Maybe I'd be Rick Ross's neighbor. Who knows? But I definitely would buy another house that I can go to in the winter. That's after I retire, right? Because yes, the kids will go through college. They will finish school first, and then we'll decide what happens after that. I definitely probably still would work, but I would probably, I'm 46. I probably would take maybe an early retirement at like maybe 55, 50, maybe. I could probably retire off of $258 million at age 50. Sure, why not? Early retirement. If I get bored, then I'll retire when I'm like 65, 60 maybe. But they're the first couple of things that I would do. Definitely would have to hire somebody first to help manage that because I would be like a little kid in the candy store, right? Now, would I buy an expensive car? Maybe a high-end Mercedes or a high-end BMW. Of course, I would like to own a Lamborghini. Of course, I would like to own a Ferrari. Who wouldn't, right? But you can't go crazy because that's how you end up going broke. That's how a lot of these rich lottery winners go broke because they just go out and they spend, they spend, they spend, right? They shut places down. They'll buy everybody drinks, buy everybody dinner. They'll just buy expensive jewelry. They'll buy expensive clothes. They'll do this. They'll do that. I would want it to last, and I think $258 million would last. At least that would be my plan. I would want it to last a while, at least in my head, right? I mean, I see things now that I want that I don't have, but it's things I don't need. It's things that I want. And I think that's where a lot of these lottery winners fail because they'll buy the extra car. They'll buy a Bentley, they'll buy a Mercedes, they'll buy a BMW. They'll buy a Cadillac Escalade, they'll buy a Suburban, they'll own all of these vehicles, right? But you're only, we're a family of four, right? So four cars, that's all you need, right? Everybody has their own vehicle. Maybe an extra luxury vehicle, maybe five if you're pushing it. But I see all these rich lottery winners buy like 10 or 15 cars and they don't even get to drive them. They sit in their garage and they're like, oh, I drive this one on this day. I drive this one on that day. I'll drive the Benz on Sunday. I'll drive the BMW on Monday. I'll drive the Lambo on Wednesday. I'll drive the convertible Mercedes on Fridays, when it's nice out. You don't need all that, and I think about when I was a kid, and I had my own house, that I was going to have this, I was going to have that, I was going to have, this, that, and the other thing. I was going to have this expensive car, I was going to have this expensive house. And, once you get out there when you're 18, 19 years old and you start paying for things, yourself, and you start having your own responsibilities, it gets scary. Like for instance, when I was a kid, I was I think I was 15 or 16 years old. And I really wanted a pair of Allen Iversons. I'll never forget them. They were blue and white. They were white with blue trim. I loved my Allen Iversons. They were my favorite pair of sneakers I've ever owned. And I went out, worked on a farm, and I eventually got the money saved up, and I went out and bought them. And then I saw something else really expensive I really wanted, and I'm like, you know what? I worked hard for that money. I really don't want to spend it. And that's the kind of mentality you should get in, right? I mean, I'm 46. I have two different retirement plans. I have a substantial amount of money put away in my 401ks and my IRAs, heavily invested. So I'm probably not where I need to be at my age, at age 46, but I've been saving since I was the age of 18. So it's, it all depends how you manage it, and as far as somebody winning 258 million, I'm assuming it was one person. Now, this is why you don't go into lottery with multiple people. You have factory workers, like 5 or 10 people, and you got to split it, 5 or 10 different ways, 9 different ways between other people that bought tickets. Then things get a little bit dicey because then, your cut is a lot less. Maybe that's the better way of doing it because that's less you can get your hands on. That's less money you can potentially end up spending on stuff that you really don't need, right? But even a single person, one lottery winner winning that much money, I don't know if the person has a family or not. I'm sure we're going to find out. You may never find out, but I don't know that I would want the public to know if I won $258 million. Because that's what your take home is going to be. It's not going to be $980 million. I mean, everybody's like, oh, or you're almost a billionaire. No, you're not. After taxes and what the lottery takes their cut, unless you do it annually and you work out a program, or a payment option where you get it annually, you're going to take a lump sum of 258 million. That's still a lot of dough. 258 million is a lot of money. That's an eye opener. I'd have to think about it for probably at least a month on how I was going to handle it. I mean, like I said earlier, house, vehicles, debt, college tuition, that all comes first, no doubt. Before anything even comes up as far as spending. And I'm not saying you wouldn't want to take vacations. I'd probably take maybe a cruise once a year, something like that. But I see people on these lottery shows on TV that go absolutely berserk. They own all these cars. They own all these thick chains and, Rolex watches, and stuff like that. I mean, this is the same iWatch I've had probably for like at least 3 or 4 years, right? And they come out with new versions, right? I mean, yes, I have the brand new iPhone 16 Pro, big deal, but I'm financing it, I'm making payments on it. It's escrowed in my monthly bill, so it comes out. I'm not going to go out and buy an iPhone 17s, or, or something like that. I mean, I'd like to have it, but you kind of have to make do with what you have. You kind of have to think about it as you got to think about it as if you're struggling and you're poor, even though you have $258 million to spend. There's the type of thing, that's the type of things you need to think of. And, some of you might be like, oh, wow, he's saying that now because he hasn't hit the lottery and he hasn't won 258 million. But you have to think of it that way. Like all the money I have in my retirement, I could buy some really, really nice high-end cars and a really, really nice second house if I wanted to, right? But I know it needs to sit there and I need to forget about it. And I think that's where a lot of lottery winners fail. They don't think about that aspect. I mean, you never know. Someday, if I played a lottery and I win, and if I were to ever hit 258 million, it might be a whole different ball game. Maybe I would go out and spend more than what I actually needed. But like I said, those things I had mentioned earlier, those things need to come first before anything, right? You need to take care of those things first before you even think about diving into the piggy bank a little bit. I want to get your take on this. If you're watching it this far into the video, what would you do with $258 million? I want to know. I mean, don't hold back. Let me know in the comments. What exactly would you do with all of that money? I mean, in some cases, it made people absolutely crazy, bonkers, right? They just went nuts spending. They went nuts into drugs, spending millions of dollars in drugs. I heard some people in some cases have gone broke because they were so rich they didn't know what to do. So that's what they started doing for entertainment, unfortunately, right? Just something you need to think about. What would you do if you hit it big? Let me know in the comments, and I will catch you in the next one.